Okay, so this evening we have a couple different things that we need to get accomplished. I'm hoping that we can accomplish them efficiently because some of us would like to watch the Suns game.
Yeah,
others,
11 o'clock.
Others really don't care about it.
Get going.
Are you ready to adjourn?
Yeah, I'm ready to adjourn. Like 20 minutes ago.
2.5 hours worth of material.
Oh, you're funny.
All right.
Where do you live?
So we'll have Joe appear by Zoom later. First item of business is a consideration of the 5-year capital improvement fund with Paige Peterson. So you're up.
Mayor, would it be all right if me and Matthew sit at the table?
Come to the table.
You want to sit at our table?
Please come to the table. Who's serving dinner?
Make it better sound-wise.
Yeah, you're worthy.
Are you worthy? Right. You had so much value to the table.
What's that?
Are we worthy?
I just got closer to the camera.
Yeah.
We printed hard copies and we can pull the copies for everybody on the room. Matthew's actually going to start it off.
All right, let's rock and roll.
Mayor and Council, good to see everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Tonight, of course, is the CIP meeting. So part of this presentation tonight will, of course, be the CIP list, and a big part of it, too, will be scenarios. We are going to show you scenarios 1 and 2 for next year. Scenario 1 will be staff recommending a bond in the future, and scenario 2 will be without a bond. Are we pulling this presentation where they can see video? For those of you that are appearing to be in Zoom, we're pulling the presentation up now. Bear with us for 1 second, please. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Again, tonight we'll be going over CIPs. Next slide, please.
New slide at the Arp Fund.
Maybe you could just use the up and down on the right-hand side.
I didn't go down.
I did.
That works.
I'm glad we're getting a compliment.
So first of all, we're going to be reviewing general fund updates, and then we'll be going over 2023 CIPs, and then the 23 CIP budget. Next slide, please. This slide, Mayor and Council, we had several requests in the budget meeting, as you will remember, last month. One of those was to increase our COLA for employees from 5% to 8%. You will remember we were requesting before a 5% COLA with a 2% merit, and after discussion, Council had asked us to put numbers together to do 8 and 2 for a total of 10. The 2% is already built in, so this is to go from the total cost for 8% would be $284,000. This, of course, is for eligible employees, does not include seasonal employees. Also, you had asked, or one of the council members asked if Richard actually needed some more public works employees, and after a lot of discussion, he'd originally asked for 2. However, he would request 2 more for a total of 4. The total of those 4 would be a cost for pay and benefits of $306,000. One thing he would like to advise you is that in the future, as City Center Park develops and as Scout Park builds out, he will need more guys in the future, but those parks aren't built yet, so he doesn't need that much additional staff yet. However, he would request 4 new guys at this time. Again, that does include the 2 positions we discussed last time, and that cost us $306,000. Next on that, we had discussed the reason for high turnover in public works was at pay. And we dug into that, and to do that, to catch public works up with where they need to be with the other cities would cost us $100,000 to catch public works team up. That will catch our guys up with most of the cities in the West Valley, but there will be some of those that will still be ahead of what our public works employees make. Lastly, you'll remember Councilmember Associate talked about fertilizer and herbicide costs going up. Originally, we had asked for $14,000, And after looking at those costs, we would request $56,000. That's, of course, roughly about a 4 times increase, as Councilmember Stokes had noted. Any questions on any of those changes on that slide? Yes,
One
ma'am.
question just on the fertilizer, that's just cost of, is that ordering more, or that's just cost of doing business right now?
Is that the same amount, Richard?
It's cost of doing business, what's expected.
Chickens are expensive.
And food.
Any questions from the Zoom call?
All right, moving along.
Okay, moving right along. Okay. Up next, for the link you see there is for the CIPs. At this time, we'll pull up the CIP sheet. As you'll see, on most of these are review or projects that we ranked a few months ago, so we're not going to go into much detail on the ones that were ranked previously because they are review, but ones that have been added, we will go over. And at this time, we'll get into CIPs.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one underneath here. Thank you.
Joey, can you make that a little bigger? For those of you that are on Zoom, can you read that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, we're going to get into the 2023 CIP projects, and then we'll get into ARP funds, HERF funds, et cetera. Again, a lot of these are repeats, so I'm going to get into the ones that are new. First of all, there is number 1. That's $3.5 million for Litchfield Square parking garage, and Woody can go into more detail on this in just a second. As you know, as Litchfield Square develops, at some point we will need parking garages, probably for roughly $26 million. This would be 3.5 of that. That would be to do the D&E to do the preliminary for all of them, to do the final design work for one and begin construction of one. And that would be a cost, again, of $3.5 million. Obviously, that depends on the speed of development. As you'll see in the presentation, we will be recommending the council consider a bond next year. We're, of course, not asking you to approve a bond for tonight. But if there's a possibility of doing a bond in the next year, we have to build it in the budget to have the budget capacity. Any questions on that item number 1 on that $3.5 million for parking garages?
This $3.5 million is for the most part all engineering costs?
Woody?
No, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we don't have a figure yet on engineering costs, but I built that into this number. So this is to do preliminary design and feasibility analysis for all 4 garages, or what I think we're going to need 4 garages, to do final design for the first garage, and then to start construction on the first garage. So this is includes about 2/3 or so of the amount, maybe 3/4 of the amount that it would take to build the first garage.
Well, why are you only including a portion of that? I mean, obviously, we're not going to start something and only build 3/4 of it. I mean,
yeah, the timing is such that we won't be able to build the garage completely in this fiscal year. I mean, we could go ahead and increase that to include the entire garage, but we won't be able
I
to.
think it would just it would be nice to know exactly how much this total line item is committing us to. So, whether it's in this fiscal year or split up over 2, I'd like to know the total amount that the line item commits us to over that period of time.
Well, okay, so we're in the process of selecting a design build firm to, as I mentioned, the first phase would be to do preliminary engineering and feasibility for the first 4 garages. So we're confirming that we can locate 4 garages and come up with the 1,250 spaces that we need on the site. We can stop there if there's no need to proceed with design and construction of the first garage. So that's probably, and all of this has to go through DRB and City Council, in terms of site planning and, the elevations of the garage, colors, materials, and so on. So I think that's probably going to take us about 6 months just to get through that first phase of preliminary engineering. If we're ready, about the first of the year, if we're ready to move ahead with the first garage, then we can authorize final design of the first garage, which will probably take a few months. And then at some point start construction.
So the speed of government, you're telling me we can't be committed to it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Basically. All right, but for now, we can go on. Sorry, go ahead.
Is this the 25.7 million down at the bottom of there?
No, it's just that we're gonna start building a garage. Okay, if we're gonna start building it, then we ought to know what it's gonna cost to build it. Now, we don't, obviously, it's a budget item that's estimated because we're gonna have a design build contract with some
Right.
contractor. But it just would be nice to know, if this is 3.5 million, I mean, what is the real number? Is it really 5 million, 6 million? I mean, it just would be nice to know what that is. You know, I understand it's of this 25 million.
The 25 is the estimated number for 4 parking lots.
That's what I was, okay.
Yeah, so maybe this is 6 million.
All depends how many spaces we build in the
Some
garage.
number. All right, that's fine. For now, that's fine.
Thank you, Woody. Next on there, again, this one as a reminder, is the 3.4 for Litchfield Square City Cash Contribution. At this time, we're just going to go through project by project. As we get into the budget, then we'll get into the pots of money where the funding is coming from. So this now just be about the individual projects.
Just so that we have a certain amount of money that we had assumed we were going to spend on the city square. Some of that came from the bond. Some came from we said we'd take it out of the general fund, and so we want to make sure that we have that money earmarked.
Yes, sir.
But spending the money on a particular item is going to require council approval.
Correct. That is correct. Mayor and council, number 2 goes right along with exactly what the mayor was saying. When we went out for $15 million in bond, we planned for $5 million in city money. We've already spent 1.6 of that. 1.6 is for the utilities because we can't pay for the utilities out of bond money because they're private utilities. And that leaves us 3.4 left of that $5 million to roll over next year. Again, those are review. Next one up is Public Works building. We talked about the need for a Public Works facility. We really do need a Public Works facility. If you've been in the building, see what the guys currently use today. We estimate a cost of $2.5 million for that. We would recommend, if we're going to go out for bond, to add that to the bond, just because of the amount of money that it is. And just from our opinion, we'd rather have the cash on hand and have a bond payment rather than pay everything up front. But again, that depends on market and various things.
Is that where we are right now,
Yes,
just rebuilding there?
That's correct. Number 4 is something that several of you may not be familiar with. We've expressed interest. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, this is the Vice Mayor. I just want to make note, I've got a conflict of interest on this one issue here, and I'm not going to take any part in this.
On number 4, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Number 4 would be to possibly acquire the 2 dentist offices that are across the street. Many of you know Dr. Ellsworth has been there for a long time. Dr. Warren is his partner there. We've expressed interest in buying those dentist offices because right now we own almost that entire city block except for the dentist office. And we have had several good meetings with him about that discussion and the possibility of leasing the building back to Dr. Warren for as long as he wants to stay, but just so the city has that building for future city office expansion. Because over time, as Litchfield Square develops around where we are today, it's going to get harder and harder to stay where we are, and you'll get more pressure to put something else here, if it be a restaurant, a wine bar, whatever it may be. So that's something we'd like to budget for, is to acquire those dentist offices. Obviously, that is an estimated number. We're not to a point to certainly not make an offer on it yet, but just something to be aware of. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving forward, again, the others have already been budgeted before, and again, these are review. As you see the scores on the side, you remember that these projects were ranked before, so again, most of you have ranked these already. Next up is Scout Lodge parking improvements. That, of course, is to build a new Scout Lodge. After that is Camelbak fence and design construction, capital contingency, Camelbak Road engineering and utility relocations, downtown electrical upgrades. You may remember we talked about electrical upgrades last time. In the general fund, we planned for having someone do the downtown lighting. This is to actually do the infrastructure downtown. This number used to be $200,000. We raised it to $325,000. And the reason why is we feel that the lights that are in City Center, Litchfield Square, should be the same as downtown. So it all connects. So it all has a connection. It all flows together.
So this is for the whole project, the existing as well as.
No, ma'am. This is to do the downtown area and to connect it to Litchfield Square. The Litchfield Square electricity is built into Litchfield Square.
Okay.
But it's just to bring it further north up to the church block.
Mhm.
So it all connects.
Cool.
And that would, of course, be to do RBG lighting. Again, we feel like it's all, so there shouldn't be a separation between the two. Next up is the street sweeper. Again, this is a reimbursement from MAG for $208,000, and this will be on the regular agenda this month. Any questions on number 5 through number 10? Again, those are all previously reviewed projects.
Is the 262, is that the total for the sweeper, or is that the net that the city's gonna pay?
262 is the total, sir. We'll be reimbursed 208.
208?
Correct.
So that number's really
54.
54,000,
That's correct.
But most of it comes from MAG.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
208,000 of it.
That's cool.
Any other questions on number 5 through number 10? Okay, moving forward. Number 11, we'd already ranked. Number 12, this number is actually up some for pathway design originally. I believe we had budgeted 175, now requesting 200. You may remember a part of this project is one the city citizen has asked about frequently regarding the pathway being updated. And Woody can talk more about that project if there is any questions. Public Works equipment, again, that's been reviewed before. Citywide road program, that 150, what that is HERF doesn't pay quite enough money for the road work that we need done every year. So we want to get this to be a regular habit where the city commits some general funds every year to HERF money, just so we keep up with road maintenance. Staggs Park updates, that's, again, these are review. Jackie Robinson drainage, perimeter wall reconstruction. Any questions on number 11 through number 18? Please tell me if I'm going too fast. I'll spend more time, obviously, on the ones that are new items. Because, of course, where we want to be tonight is where council approves this list for FY23. Pending, of course, council approval per project. We'd still have to come back to you per project. But this way, we'd have the list going forward to know what to plan for 23.
Can I ask, were there any, we've got all the rankings here.
Yes,
Were there any of them that had huge outliers? Or was everybody pretty much clustered kind of around the same point?
There were some council members that didn't rank anything, any projects whatsoever. So that's something to be aware of. As far as huge outliers, they are averaged, of course, between the group, the ones that we received scoring results from. Other questions so far? One thing I would point out, Councilor Romack, number 15 has the Tierra Lake issues we talked about before, having some kayak lockers and that kind of thing at the lake across from Staggs Park. We did include some numbers, so I know that's something you want to do in the past. We did include that number 15.
Yeah, I
Can I circle
appreciate
back
that.
to the-
Thank you, Matthew.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, can you circle back to the pathway? You added more into that because of that request we keep having.
Well, that section is actually in there. Woody, do you mind touching on number 12 a little bit on the pathway design while we've got it at 200?
Yeah, sure. So the idea here is to kind of update and spruce up the pathway system, to add, get rid of some of the obsolete landscaping, update the landscaping, maybe put in some additional shady areas, shady benches, try to create a little bit more shade along the pathway and provide some lighting at the nodes where it intersects with streets. So it's just basically an upgrading and improvement of the pathway system.
Still the same type of pavement?
Yeah, we would not change the pathway itself. We just improve things on both sides of the concrete.
Is the one that extends up from Allegra, I think it's Allegra. Yeah, to Lolama. Is that one concrete now? It's been many years since I've been on it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's concrete all the way.
Okay. Thank you.
Woody, how far does the pathway go from south end to north end, like street to street?
Yeah, it starts at Desert Avenue down by the Public Works, the church parking lot, and extends all the way through to the rec center. Then there's kind of a gap between the dentist's office and Fairway Drive, and then it picks up again at Fairway Drive and goes all the way up to La Loma.
So this would go through Litchfield Square as well?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're going to do with Litchfield Square is to try to fill that gap and have this pathway identified through Litchfield Square to and through it.
Thank you, Woody. Other questions on number 11 to number 18? Okay. Number 19 has been reviewed before as well. Litchfield Road right-of-way landscaping. This is a new one, $50,000 to do some landscaping from Bird Lane to the Scout Underpass along the side of Litchfield Road. Basically, just to make it needs to be brought up to look like the rest of the landscaping in that area, in our opinion. That's $50,000 basically for landscaping enhancement. The next one is $25,000 for D&E for a traffic signal at Fry's and Litchfield Road. This will be there at Panda Express. This depends, of course, the speed of the Sun Health development. The road across the street going to Sun Health will actually have to be moved. I'd have to look at the map. I want to say to the south, where it lines up with this entrance into Fry's. That's on Sun Health, obviously. But again, this is to do the D&E for that intersection. And we would sync it, of course, with the Litchfield Camelbak road light.
So there'll be one at Panda Express and one at Missouri?
Yes, ma'am.
But they'll be synced.
Yes,
as
ma'am.
well.
That's correct.
That will be key.
Right, agreed. The next one, Councilman you just touched on, is the traffic signal at Missouri. Again, that depends on Sun Health on their speed of development. And also, that one has a lot of partners, because that light, some of it's ours, some of it's Sun Health, and some of it is Glendale's too. Because it's right on the city border.
So is Sun Health's entrance coming into their northern, going to be across from Missouri, or will it be?
Yes.
So it will come
It'll be a
across right there,
four-way.
okay.
I would also recommend that be the entrance to the Hilltop, so it's a traffic light. Because there's only been more traffic in there over the years, I think it just makes sense.
So where the entrance is, pseudo entrances now would be closed off, would be a separate.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. After that, of course, we have security cameras for $25,000. $22,000 for door badge entries, reader systems. Again, these are reviewed items. One thing I would say on number 24 is that if we end up in a different building, we could move number 24 to a different building if that's a concern. Number 25 is a rollover item, and number 26 is more of a contingency item. And that's it for general fund CIPs. Any questions on any of those projects?
Vice Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Matthew, did I miss it? Is there anything working or on this list to put a right-hand turn lane at Camelbak and Litchfield Road to turn east, where the traffic backs up in there?
A dedicated right turn.
Keith, do you remember?
It's in, the 5-year,
What year is it in?
I want to say 24.
We're looking 1 second, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, it's in the, actually, it's in the non-prioritized projects mapping.
Mr. Vice Mayor, Keith is saying it's in the non-prioritized project, sir. If that's something the council would like to move up to 23, we could certainly do that.
I think we've got a mistake in the way we designed it. We need to fix it. And if it can be done as part of the Camelbak improvements, maybe that's the time and place to do it.
I would agree.
Yeah, it would be a good idea, I think, to keep that one in a bag full of other ones that are gonna relate to Camelbak Road.
We could certainly do that. Other questions on the general fund CIPs? That brings us to a total of CIP projects for FY '23 of $16 million. Several things to point out on that. One is that we are gonna get back $3.5 million from the county for Camelbak. And we also have some other monies we've collected over the years for various signals, as you see. $68,000 received for the signal at Fry's, $45,000 for the signal at Missouri, and $208 for the mag reimbursement on the sweeper. One thing I would note on that, the money for the signals, we already have cash on hand. That's not more money to be brought in, it's already here. Questions on those before we get into HERF and ARPs, et cetera? Okay. And at this time, we're going to turn over to HERF for FY23. Keith, you want to come here with us?
Want to come sit down, or?
Hi.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Mayor, members of council, the HERF funds are restricted funds specific to street repair and replacement. We have available in fiscal year 23 a little over $1.6 million. What's allocated for that is Dysart Road and Indian School repair work that goes between Indian School and the county limits just to the north. We all know, anybody who's driven on that section of the road, it does need some love. So we've allocated $1 million. That's an increase from the $620,000 that was originally estimated, given the increases in materials and labor. The remaining amount, $619,000, is allocated for next year's street repairs and maintenance. That's just under $620,000 for a total of the $1.6 million we have ready to rock. Are there any questions?
Any questions on HERF budget for FY23?
Right there.
And HERF is not a use it or lose it.
1 second, sir.
No, HERF, and Paige is very nice to educate me on this every time I ask her the question, but HERF carries over every year.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Question, I've noticed over in the villages, we refinished some of those roads with a spray-on sealant of some sort that didn't seal the cracks, which means the subbase is subject to being washed away. Is this money that you've got here in the future going to seal those cracks and seal those roads?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, the 10-year road maintenance program does identify several of those roads over in Village and other locations throughout the city to do crack seal. So the treatment that those areas received this year was to maintain the asphalt. The cracks, through a visual inspection prior to, and Woody could probably explain it, he did the actual inspection, but identifying cracks that we can quote unquote live with until we have to allocate the crack seal, which then will take care of that and then apply a different coating on top of that. So it's kind of a process of that approach. We never want it to get too bad to where the cracks are too large to where exactly what you're saying, where the sub base starts getting affected, though.
Great, thank you.
Any other HERF questions? Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the ARP funds. And we're going to have Woody talk about the ARP funds, and then he's going to talk about the Litchfield Square project. Woody, if you please.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So the ARP funds, we have a total of a little over 2 million, 2.1 million, and we have decided to allocate that, I think it's to 3 projects. So the first project would be the downtown storm drain engineering and construction. That's the phase 4 and 5 of the last phases of our downtown storm drain project. That the total budget on that, total project estimate is about $3 million. That also includes the pump station to dewater the cart path underpass. We have a IGA with flood control district who is going to pay for half of the project. So this is our share. Well, the 1.2 million is our share for this coming fiscal year, and we expect to have that under construction around the end of the year. The second project is Vista Verde drainage. This project has a total cost of about $670,000. And again, an IGA with a flood control district, this time 75% matching. So the flood control district will pay the majority of that cost. And I know that Keith is working hard to get a contractor ready to go on that project. So we should be starting that fairly quickly. And then the third project is the Camelbak Park wall design and construction. And that is for the solid wall or view fence, whatever we end up with, that would go along the north side of Camelbak wall and along the east side to connect to the existing walls that are there. And the first step in that process is to do the engineering, and but it's a relatively quick design process, so we should be able to get that project built or at least started in FY23.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Woody, with that wall on Camelbak, do we have Parks and Rec and Design Review possibly in the mix on this also with their input?
Yes, absolutely. We have started down that path a little bit with the council, but there was some information that we had to get on where the irrigation line is out there, so we wouldn't end up building the wall on top of their pipe. We now know where that is, so we can go ahead and start design on it. But you're right, the first steps in the process is to get in front of RPG and help us with how they want the final look of the wall to be, whether it's partly view fence, all solid, whatever that might be. We got clear direction from the council, I think, that we wanted to put the wall out as far as reasonably possible to pick up as much land inside the park as possible. So I think that's already been decided. Now it's a question of what the final design will look like.
Great, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Didn't we have some issues with the wigwam that we were needing to resolve regarding the wall and the placement of the wall?
Yes.
Where are we on that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, there were two issues.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Two issues. One, what I just mentioned, was trying to figure out where the wigwam irrigation pipe is located. We've now done that. The second is acquiring a couple of small parcels of land from Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, actually from Goodyear Farms, which is owned by Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. They have agreed to quitclaim deed those parcels to us, but for some reason their process is just taking a very long time to get it done. And that they have reassured us that they are going to do it when they get around to it. But I don't think that that ownership necessarily stops this project or slows down the wall project, because those parcels are unusable for anything else.
Thank you.
Councilman Donahue?
Yeah, so here's the Camelbak Park wall design and construction 2.79, but then on CIP that shows $1 million. That's two different. Number 6 on CIP is Camelbak Park view fence design and construction. So number 6 on CIP and number 3 aren't the same.
They are the same. The ARP is a different funding source, so we're using up the remaining funds out of there, and whatever's left over comes out of general fund.
And then the parking lot there is following year type of thing, or what? Do we have, where's the
Parking lot is on FY23, isn't it?
Yes.
mhm.
Is no opinion. Camelbak. So Paige, remind me, did we combine the wall and the park into that line item? I think we might have done that.
Yeah, the perimeter wall around the north and east sides of Camelbak Park. I don't remember.
We look into this and I'll.
Councilman Donahue, to your question about the ARP funds, so as Keith was saying, the reason why you see the breakout on that is we only have so long to spend the ARP funds, so we want to spend some of the ARP monies on this, and the balance of it would be general fund CIP.
Gotcha.
And we will have you an answer on the parking lot question. Other questions on ARP projects? Okay. Woody, if you would take us into the Litchfield Square project fund, please.
Yes, so for FY '23, we're projecting to spend about 18.7 million on the project total. And that's broken down into 3 GMPs. GMP 3 is already underway, and that's construction of the first phase of streets, including landscaping, and, street lights and everything for Litchfield Road and for Village Parkway. GMP 4 would then build the rest of the streets, the internal streets, rework some medians in Old Litchfield Road and Wigwam Boulevard to make those street intersections. And then the same thing, street lighting, landscaping, irrigation, electrical, and so on. And then GMP 5 would be the basic park construction minus the amphitheater, clock tower, the second restroom, and the playground. So ultimately, we would have a GMP 6 that would include those things and maybe some other things that get added into the project towards the end. But for now, this is what we're planning to spend in the coming fiscal year. And the sources of this $18.7 million is that we have 10.5 million that is remaining from the bond, the current bond, that, some of it, the $15 million bond. So that's 10.5 remaining on that. As you saw earlier, we have a $3.4 million allocation from the general fund, which represents the remainder of the city's $5 million commitment to the project. And then the difference of about $4.8 million would need to be made up by other sources, such as the sale of land within Litchfield Square.
Questions on Litchfield Square Capital Project Fund? Again, we'll get into the budget side of it. This is just the project side. Okay. Mayor and Council, also in your package, you have the budgets for 24, 25, 26, and 27. I don't recommend getting into those unless you would like to. The reason I say that, that's a long time from now. Projects will change between now and then. We can certainly get into those if you'd like to, what we're looking at for 24, 5, 6, 7. It's up to you. I think it's important to have a 5-year list, but again, that's at least a year from now, and things will change. Some things will naturally roll over from 23, but we won't know that until we're here a year from now.
It's fine to go on, I think, go on.
Okay, all right. Okay, that being said, this time we're going to go back to the presentation. One second while we pull the presentation up. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Paige, and she's going to spend some time going over some scenarios and numbers with you. Paige, if you please.
Thanks, Matthew, and Mayor and Council. So we walked us through the details of the project, so I'm going to take us to the budget, capital budget side of these. So we're going to go over 2 scenarios tonight. The first scenario is going to be that the city issues $29.5 million in revenue bonds. That will cover nearly $26 million for the parking garages, about 1.3, and this is an estimate right now, for the dental offices, and then $2.5 million for the new public works facility, for a total of $29.5 million. And then scenario 2 is We don't issue any bonds, and we use just our one-time revenue sources and city reserves. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through a lot of different numbers of how we get to these, so I wanted to start out with just a summary, so you have just an idea before we get into the details of the numbers. So I'm estimating that the general fund will have a beginning fund balance at the start of the fiscal year of $19.2 million. Included in the budget for next year, we are budgeting our revenues will exceed expenses by $2.2 million. If we do issue bonds throughout the year, I'm estimating 50% of the debt service payment, because we would only have one if we issued mid-year, roughly $1 million. And obviously, if we do issue bonds, we'll bring you multiple scenarios. I'm just giving a high level right now. So our fund balance before the one-time revenues and one-time expenses would be $20.4 million. We've included in the budget $1,050,000 for construction sales tax. Our fiscal year 23 allotment of the ARP funds is just over $1 million. All the projects that Matthew just went over with you in the general fund, the amount that would be required from the general fund, because there are some other sources to cover these projects, would be $4.5 million. So that would give us an estimated ending fund balance on June 30 of 23 of just under $18 million. We have to subtract out what the council's minimum fund balance of 15%, so that's just under 1.8, and then the 35% stabilization fund of 4.1. So if all of this, if everything in scenario 1 happened, that would leave us an unassigned or available balance at the end of next year of $12 million. Next slide, please. Do you have the OneDrive link? One's better. Yes, thank you. So this is scenario 1, our bond issuance and other one-time capital revenue sources. So I'm doing first column is estimated fiscal year 22, our current year, next year's budget, and then projected through fiscal year 27. So this current fiscal year, the bond reimbursement that we're using for the existing project is $4.5 million. And when we move into next year, we've included the $3.5 million from Maricopa County for Camelbak Road, the $208,000 that we discussed from MAG. If the deal with the dental offices were to take place, sounds like they wouldn't be ready to move out right away, so there might be some lease revenue. This is a deal has not been done. This is just an estimate that I did online on estimated leasing income. And then the existing Litchfield Square bonds, we're going to have about $10.5 million left for next year that will carry forward to next year.
10.5 is just cash we haven't spent yet, is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Of the bond money. If we issue bonds for the parking garages, that $3.5 million is what we just went over during the project for phase 1 of the parking garages. Then proceeds from parcel sales. it's anticipated we may generate $10 million from the entire parcel sales. So in '23, I put in $8 million, which I think is, could be an aggressive number, and then $2 million next year. And then the other bond reimbursement would be for the total of the public works facility and the dental offices, so $3.8 million. So total revenues and other sources equal $29.6 million. Again, that's assuming that the city issues bonds, and also assumes parcel sale revenue of $8 million. However, there could be some things that move forward as this project evolves, because we're not exactly sure when everything will happen. If, say, we were to only receive $3 million in parcel sale revenue, then the general funds reserve would have to make up the difference. But then next year, when we actually sell more parcels, then, we get paid back. So there's going to be some things that move. Right now, it's kind of a crystal ball. Next slide, please.
So in this list here, everything's supposed to be adding, they're all plus numbers, or there's some negative numbers here? It's a little confused, because looking at these, they don't seem like they add up, but, in fact, they don't add up. The parts that are in this gray area are not in the bottom total revenue bottom line?
Sorry, it is confusing. The parts in the gray area sum to this 25.8. That's the detail of the 25.
That's 25.8.
So if you added up 3.5, the 208, the 150, and the 25.8, it's 29.6.
I'm still good. So, and that 29.6 does not really, that doesn't tie at all to this 29.5 bond, right?
So the bond would be, so when we issue bonds, it sits in a separate account from the city, and then we just request for reimbursement as we spend the funds, as we draw down on the funds. So phase one is 3.5, and in fiscal year '24, it's 6.4, 6.4, 6.4, and then 3 and 27. And this is a high-level estimate that Woody's put together as well. We don't know how fast.
So this is the draw on those bonds goes across, is in the gray area.
Yes, and it goes from 23 to 27.
The draw on the bond is the 3.5 to 6.4, it's that line, correct?
Correct. Because as this is a multi-year project, so we would draw down as the project evolves. We would still recommend issuing the bonds up front in case the project moves faster and bond issuance costs are very high.
And what is the 25.8 million?
That's just the total of the sale of the property and the bond reimbursement. If you added up everything in the gray.
That comes up this way. So that 25.8 is the old bond.
Yes.
And some of the new bond.
Yes, and $8 million for parcel sales.
Right. And 3.8 is what? Or is that, what is that?
That's another bond reimbursement for the public works facility and the dental offices.
That's in the 29.5?
Yes.
All right.
Just broke out. So if we go to the next slide, this is the expense side of the capital project fund. The first column is the current fiscal year estimated ending. Capital projects other than Litchfield Square are 1.5. The city's cash contribution to Litchfield Square for the utilities is 1.6. And then the bond proceeds that we will draw down through now from the end of June is about 4.5. So total expense is 7.6. These numbers at the bottom that are circled in red, this is the difference between those sources and the expenses, and that's what the general fund has to cover. So that transfer in, the 3.1, is this year's general fund capital contribution, which has been included in the monthly finance report. Moving to next year, capital projects, these total everything that we've gone through. The project list, I've just broke some of them out separately. $5 million for multiple projects in there. The capital projects identified using the ARP funds, that's to spend down the entire grant of $2.1 million. And there's the dental office purchase, again, an estimated number of 1.3. The public works facility at 2.5. Then the city cash contribution, the 3.4. Again, that's what the city already pledged, the $5 million this current year. We've spent 1.6, so 3.4 is what is remaining. The bond proceeds of, the remaining bond proceeds of 10.4. Then what's left to finish the project next year is 4.8 million, and that's where we haven't identified a specific funding source. So if we sell a parcel or parcels, that could cover that. If there isn't another revenue source, then it will need to come from city general fund reserves, which is how this is, that's what's at the bottom. Then the parking garage at 3.5, that's the bond proceeds. Budget $1 million for contingency, and then our $50,000 for capital. So total is $34.2 million. And after we subtract this from the other sources that we just went over on the prior slide, it would require $4.5 million from the general fund. And if you took all of the projects that are in this list are built into the future years. So next year's projected general fund contribution would be $11 million. Following year 1.2, obviously that will change. This is just planning so we can see where we would be if all these projects happen.
Woody, are you there? Yeah. Are you there, Woody?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. So when we started with the Litchfield Square, what was the overall estimate on the cost of Litchfield Square, to build our part of it, to build the city part of it, to do all the infrastructure and put in the park, just the basic part? Is it 22 million or is it more than that?
No, it was originally 26 million. And then
Did the 26 million included all of the different amenities in the park, didn't it?
No, that's what I was just going to say. The 26 million excluded the things like the clock tower, the nice to have things, the playground, things that we talked about putting off until the future.
It excluded or included?
Excluded.
So the 26 million didn't have any of the wish list.
Well, it included that's correct, except it did include the main restroom building and the amphitheater. But I'm not sure where we're going to end up with the amphitheater at this point.
So I'm just trying to get a feel for what all these numbers are. So we've got 15 million in here that's coming from the bond that we've already issued. And the city has already spent 1.6 million, so that's 16.6 million towards the 22 million, correct?
Correct, yes. The 26.
And the 22 million, all right, so 26 million then. So we have 10 million left to spend in the park for the streets around the park, Litchfield Square. And that 10 million will get the amphitheater, but not the clock tower.
I can't guarantee it will get you the amphitheater because I think that amphitheater is growing beyond what we originally anticipated.
Okay, then something less than a grand amphitheater, but at least a little bit of an amphitheater.
I wish I could give you a better answer, but we're not there yet.
Good sponsor.
Okay. Depends how big you want to build it.
What's that?
Depends how big you want to build it.
I'm just trying to understand of these, you've got Litchfield Square project, $4.8 million. We don't know where it's coming from. I want to know where that is in this $22 or $26 million number. What is that?
What do you, if I'm misunderstanding here, so what I'm thinking back on this, so we talked about a total of 26 million. So we bonded for 15 million. The city was gonna commit 5 or 6 million for our matching funds, whatever you wanna call it. And then we were gonna have about 5 million in amenities. And that 5 million would have either been paid by the city out of city funds, or we would have sold sponsorships for a total of 26 million. Is that how you remember it, or am I, go ahead.
And land sales.
So in that case, 26 does, so 26 does include the amenities then?
Yeah, I was directed to try to eliminate or postpone some of the more expensive amenities to get it down to.
I agree.
Yeah, as much as possible, but.
I'm with you there. But so, 15 million bond money, 6 million city match funds, and 5 million in amenities, however those amenities get paid for a total of 26 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So they're in the 26.
Yeah, what I would like to have as part of this is an understanding of we need to get all the infrastructure done in Litchfield Square, and we need to get some basic things in the park. So the basic park, the benches around it, the landscaping in the park, the grass, and maybe at least an area where we could have our concerts, and maybe not without the best sound system that money can buy. Just a basic area like a lawn that we're using at Litchfield at the Wigwam now. But a basic park, so we can understand exactly how much funds do we need to make sure we have available so we get that done, because all that's got to get completed and be done and finished if we're going to start selling parcels. We can't have a dirt park or a park that doesn't have a sidewalk or whatever.
Yeah.
So we need to really understand what is that number, and then what's the extra number. So when we look at this $8 million here, we understand how much of that $8 million do we really have to spend, and how much of it will we spend if we have extra money, or if we've sold a bunch of the parcels and we've got money from parcel sales.
Well, the GMP 5 right here says 4 million park construction minus the amphitheater, clock tower, and the second restaurant.
Right.
For 2023.
But the trouble is, we don't have.
Well, plus excuse me, Mr. Mayor, plus we're just looking at FY23. This project's going to extend into FY24. So, but I understand what you're asking for, Mayor, and I can put that projection together for you.
I just need to understand what of these numbers that are, that some of these numbers we can choose not to spend, and other numbers it's hard to choose not to spend them. And it's hard for us to choose not to spend what we need to do to complete that park as part of the infrastructure in Litchfield Square, because we're going to be out trying to market that square, and we can't market it without sidewalks and the lawn and that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Romack.
It's Claire. On the first slide on revenue, we're accounting for $8 million in parcel sales to get to 29 in revenue. And then we're accounting for expenses of 34 with a $5 million shortfall, or $4.5 million shortfall. But we're also accounting for $8 million in parcel sales. Does that not seem strong with how long it takes to get something into escrow and funded?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So we're accounting for in fiscal 23, $8 million in revenue incoming from parcel sales.
Previous page, gray area.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, let me try to answer that, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Clare. We're identifying $8 million in parcel sales as a source, a possible source of revenue for, to offset that $4.8 million shortfall that we've identified for FY23.
Well, if I'm reading this right, and I could be mistaken, we're showing 29 million in revenue, 34 million in expenses. We're already at 4.5 million in shortfall, inclusive of the $8 million in parcel sales.
That's correct. And if we didn't sell 8 million in parcel sales, then the contribution from the general fund would increase in fiscal year 23. But then in 24, we would get paid back when the parcel sales did happen. So the city's reserves might have to float it for a year.
But you have general fund money going in 24 of 11 million. Right?
Right.
So you're not gonna have much float there. You start floating things, this boat's gonna float itself to the
Sell the
bottom.
parcels.
Yeah, we got it. Well, even if we sell the parcels, I mean, literally, you're gonna be, if we sell the parcels, there's $15 million over that 2-year period. And it looks like our unassigned fund balance is projected as 12.
And that includes that. That includes spending that.
What's that?
That includes spending all of this, that 12
That
million.
12 million is after spending the 11
Yes. This isn't a,
4.85 is in this 23 number, so after you have included spending that, and gives us an unassigned balance of 12 million at that point.
yes,
Well, which 11 million would be required for the next year, in the next year, correct?
correct. And I have a slide on that, the
Yeah,
ending
okay.
fund balance with all this included.
It's a lot for us to take in, I think.
It is. It is. There's a lot of moving parts.
It's an exam.
Yeah.
Councilmember Claire, did we answer your question, sir?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure. I mean, I understand that we're going to sell the parcels. I just feel that 8 million is a strong number to think that that's going to happen in fiscal 23 based on the speed of government.
If it does take longer, you're right, sir. Let's say, for example, we sold 4 million, not 8. Then that 4.5 from the general fund would, of course, become 8.5. You're exactly right. The general fund payment would have to go up if the land sale went down. But as Paige said, then we would get the land sale money on the next year. It just depends on the speed of the land sale.
It's an aggressive, assuming $10 million in land sales is aggressive. Because you've got, I don't know, do we have 8 parcels to sell total?
About 9.
9 parcels to sell total. How many parcels would it total?
We have
7?
7 parcels to sell, one of which is lot 3, which is in the process of being sold.
So we have 6 left. So those 6 left, the parcel, that parcel we sold for, what, 650,000?
610.
Huh?
610.
610. So that might say that all of the parcels might only sell for 4 million. All the remaining parcels. Now, maybe we'll get more for the future ones. That's what we're gonna have to see. But 10 million may be pretty aggressive on that.
We can reduce it if, that everything.
Well, I think it would make sense, again, who knows what these parcels are gonna sell for, and particularly, nobody knows what the economy's gonna be like for the next year, so.
Yeah,
I would tend to put them in at the same amount we've already sold the first parcel for.
okay.
Do that.
At least then, if it goes more than that, then then you're ahead of the game. Yeah. This is something we're gonna be going through, multiple times as we go forward. So we're gonna get through it tonight, and then it can cook in your brains for a little while, and then we'll come back to it.
Thank you.
So go ahead.
So that's the end of the capital improvement budget. So I just want to touch again on the general fund so you can see how the general fund can support the capital fund, capital budget. I'm not going to go through these details. We went through the details at the last study session. It's just updated with current numbers, and it breaks out Litchfield Square sales tax revenue, beginning possibly in fiscal year '25. It's a low number, and then you can see it gradually starts to increase. It also assumes the additional sales tax to pay for the parking, and that would go alongside the existing city sales tax. So that would bring our budgeted revenues to $13.1 million. Next slide, please. This is the general fund expenses. I won't go through the details since we went through that a couple weeks ago. Fiscal year '23 budget, our total revenue is $13.1 million. Since this is the scenario one that includes a new bond, that includes a $1 million bond payment. So total operating expenses, including that bond payment, is 11.9. So that would leave us an operating surplus of 1.2. And then I've increased that debt payment to $2 million fiscal year '24 moving forward. However, if we were going to issue bonds, we would bring you different scenarios and possibly do interest only at first, or whatever made sense at the time. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is the general fund impact, our one-time revenues, and estimated fund balance. So this just brings it all together. It includes the construction sales tax, the ARPA money in '23, and then if you'll notice in '24, this is also an estimate, because at some point, the city is going to sell the infrastructure to the CFD. So a crystal ball estimate of selling 25% of the infrastructure beginning in fiscal year '24, and that would be every year until '27. Obviously, we would, as the time came, we would make the best decision of when the CFD should issue the bonds, but just to build that in there so we know that that revenue will also be coming at some point. The capital projects, those are the numbers we've already gone over. So this gives us the total fund balance at the very bottom. The unassigned fund balance is probably the number to pay attention to, because that's what would be available to us. It would drop to its lowest in fiscal year '24 at 5.2. However, once I reduce the estimated parcel sales, that's going to change these.
It'll come down.
This is going to come down. And again, all of these there's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of what ifs. It just depends on when things start happening, what happens to the economy. So all this is definitely will change. We'll just have to keep up with the changes. This will be a living document for a while. So the next slide is it's a repeat of the summary. We went through so much, I just wanted to touch base on this again. So end of next fiscal year, an unassigned fund balance of $12 million. If all of that were to happen. Obviously, I'm going to drop down the parcel sale revenue. So if we dropped it 4, this number will now be 8.
This lane first page, we're only $4 million. That $12 million on a fund balance would now be $8 million.
Correct, which is still a healthy fund balance.
Right, that's still above the required reserve, et cetera.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's still, with a budget of $10 million in expenses, to have, $8 million in the bank is still a very healthy fund balance. That was a lot to take in.
Pays for shoes.
Yeah.
Any more questions on scenario 1 before we get into scenario 2? Scenario 1 was with the bond, scenario 2 is without.
Correct, and maybe the summary is all we would need to touch on, because the only difference is we're now paying for everything, all the projects, cash out of pocket. So unassigned fund balance at the end of next year would be 6.1. I think the important part to talk about, which would be, if you can go to the next one, Terry. Keep going. You get to the general fund impact, one-time revenues and one-time expenses. Keep going. One more. So that obviously would go up by $1 million because we wouldn't have that debt service payment, but if you look at the total fund balance, once we got to fiscal year '24, our unassigned fund balance would be in the red. Quite frankly, the city just does not
Couldn't
have
do
enough
that.
cash to do
Yeah,
this.
so if we don't do a bond, then we can't do these capital projects. That's the bottom
The
line.
parking garages, and we could afford the public works.
We
and
could afford some of it, but not all of it.
Yeah.
Just drag them out.
Mhm. Which is basically, that's how we've operated the city in the past, is we have not borrowed money to do capital projects right away. We've just saved and spent, and it's gonna have to be a little bit different when it comes to the parking garages. The question is, when do we have to really do that?
And
We have to do that. We have to have parking, right?
Or let them park across the street.
Yeah.
I think if we,
Let them park in your neighborhood.
They can stop at your house first.
if we at least include just the legal budget capacity, then it will give you
The
the
option,
options that you need.
Yeah, which makes sense. It makes sense to do the budget in a way that we have the legal capacity and deal with this decision, obviously, as we go forward and we know more.
Definitely, and that would give you the flexibility that you needed.
Yeah, because we can't, and I think everybody knows, we cannot do the parking garages without bond financing.
Right.
And that's why we've talked about having the special sales tax, within Litchfield Square to make the payments on the bonds. So this is not brand new knowledge. The only difference tonight is you're saying maybe we should add in the dentist's office. Otherwise, it's the same of what we've kind of talked about anyway.
Yes.
It will be free parking.
What's that?
It will be free parking.
Well, and that's the idea, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, for example, if you go to Flagstaff and you park in one of the parking garages that they built so they can have that downtown area, you pay.
Yeah.
And the parking garages are full.
Yeah.
So it's not like people choose not to park there. A lot of times the businesses will reimburse you, so if you go get your
Yeah,
ticket and you give it to them and they give you $5 back or something, but, So that's something we can just, we can decide that in the future too.
And that includes what I have.
Okay. Before I get to staff recommendations, I would just like to thank Paige for all the work she's put in these scenarios. She's basically spent the last 2 weeks here in the office. She just sleeps here at night, basically working with numbers. So we appreciate all the work she's put into this.
Thank you.
We'll wrap up with our staff recommendation. Of course, you know what our recommendation is going to be. We recommend issuing bonds. As the mayor said, that will certainly come back for future discussions. We'll have to get quotes. Interest rates are changing day by day, as we all know. Our recommendation here was to do bonds for $29.5 million. That would be to cover the parking garages, public works facility, and to buy the dentist offices that we've discussed. That would preserve city cash reserves. We'd have the option to pay it off early. Again, we could do it as we did the CFD bond, where the first 5 years are interest only. That's all flexible. And again, the parking garage debt of $26 million, we would recommend to be reimbursed by special sales tax within Litchfield Square.
Yeah. At this point, I think it makes sense that we're not going to make a decision on issuing bonds.
Yes, sir.
But it makes sense for you to budget as though we were going to, so we have the capacity should we decide to go down that path next year. It could very well be that we don't need to do anything with bonds for another year. So that's something we can deal with again as we go forward. We just want the flexibility to be able to make that decision.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, on a tentative budget, you can always go down, you can't go up.
Now, does anybody on the phone have any disagreement with that approach? Okay.
And just one thing, I do have to have this to the newspaper by Wednesday.
This Wednesday?
This Wednesday, so we
Okay.
meet our publishing, so even though you don't adopt it till the week after,
Right,
it'll be sent to them
all right.
the week from today.
That's fine with me.
Any questions?
Questions on the phone?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Romack?
Thank you. It seems like we're, more debt and more debt, and our way out of this is to sell parcels. Are we making any headway or any success as far as selling any other parcels besides the one to the Hearth Group?
Councilman Romack, we are making progress with JLL to get that RFP out. I would say it'll be on the market easily within the next few months to have that RFP out and getting bids in. So we look forward to that. Of course, their concern too is the market is changing. They want to get it out there too. We actually had a meeting about this today about getting bids in. On the Hearth parcel, I wouldn't expect that to close till probably August, September. That's very, very dependent on Mike, on how they do that. But again, we'll expect the RFP through JLL to go out in the next few months, but then of course it'll take some time for those to come in, et cetera, and go through the agreement process. But yes, sir, I think there'll be plenty of bids on those parcels when we get to that point.
All right. Well, that's the light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
Correct, sir. That's the gamble.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions?
Okay, that concludes, I think, our discussion on this budget line item. So there is a need to go into executive session for a couple of items. So is there a motion to adjourn the regular session and go into executive session?
Second.
All those in favor of going to executive session, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Mr. Vice Mayor, did you vote?
Aye.
I think that was an aye.
Like it.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we are now going into
Fresca is now sparkling soda water.
what is?
I love Fresca.
Oh, Fresca.
I'm not supposed to have it because I take thyroid medicine and I'm
Really?
technically,
Fresca?
yeah, because it's grapefruit juice.
Oh, yeah.
Is that bad?
You're not supposed to?
You're not supposed to take grapefruit if you take thyroid.
I take thyroid
Really?
medicine. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was the very first sugar-free soda.
Yeah.
It's one of the ways my wife
Okay.
got me in was with Fresca.
Okay. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
And next-
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.